Okay, so look, today's session is called Planning for Teaching, and really it came about as EDs, myself, colleagues, other EDs, such as the lovely Michelle Wilkinson, who's joining us this morning, uh, regularly have conversations with academics around upcoming teaching sessions, or sometimes in the middle of teaching sessions around the desire to be able to plan more effectively for upcoming teaching sessions. And basically, we put this session together and also some tools in and around that space to help try and mitigate that scenario. And it's obviously a work in progress because we're constantly iterating really in that space. And really, this session is designed as it's intended to be a collaborative session where people also talk about their own ideas in this space. And so you'll be prompted several times to sort of get involved in those questions, that discussion through some of the activities we have going on. But we do hope to be able to give you some effective tools to help facilitate your own planning. That may help you for 2022-30. It may be something that you pass along or recommend to others later on. So look, my name's Lachlan Kalache. I'm the lead learning technologies in the Division of Learning and Teaching, and I'm joined by Michelle Wilkinson. Sorry, I'm getting a little tongue-tied this morning, who is a senior ED for Faculty Arts and Education as her faculty team. We would normally be joined by Beck Atchison as well, but Beck's been caught up, so it will be the two of us this morning taking you through this session. We will be looking at some tools in and around planning for teaching after we have a bit of a chat around some of the focus questions that influence that conversation. We'll be presenting the online teaching plan tool for you to use moving forwards. Michelle will be talking in greater detail about the subject delivery guide that exists for our staff to use. And we'll also talk a little bit, time permitting, about the lesson planning tool that we're building at the moment. Hopefully we'll have that available for people to look at. I would suggest it'll be ready more for 60 rather than 30, but happy to talk about some of the concepts going into that as well. All the PD sessions in the Teacher Skills PD series are recorded and are available in the Professional Learning Hub. We'll provide links to that as we go as well, that you can pass on to others, etc. So usually about half an hour after the session's done, I put them up there. All right, so look, let's get into things. As always, please feel free to chat in the chat pod. Michelle will be talking to you there. I'll get to things as I can. I'd like to talk a little bit about the scenario of the new teaching session and the recurring problems that a lot of staff have. And some of the problems that we see from the DLT side of things. And the first one really is that there is a massive difference in the level of planning undertaken by various teachers. So what they might be casuals who've just been put on, for example, sessionals very new to the space. You might be experienced campaigners in this space, but the amount of planning undertaken may very well be the hours preceding your subject outline being submitted for the first time. For other people, it's weeks and months in the making or thinking about it during teaching. But there may be very little undertaken. There might be a whole lot undertaken. Most of the time, our kind of, I guess, calls for help are in relation to sessional staff who've been put on very late in the piece that need help, either with different technology tools or wanting to think more about how they're going to approach their teaching for the session coming up. These days, a lot of that relates to online delivery as well. We've become more refined in that space. We don't really have a guarantee that there's any benchmark level of quality or skill level in terms of delivery, particularly with regards to confidence with particular technology tools. Although we try and put in place strategies to mitigate that. We provide a whole lot of PD and resourcing, etc. But at the moment, there is no benchmark level of skill in terms of confidence here around technology tools. As a result, of course, the quality of our learning and teaching experiences here arguably is not consistent. And so hence we have sessions like this one. And what we're really trying to introduce into that space are pragmatic processes for us to be able to suggest to others or tools that will help people approach their various problems in that space. So some of the questions in this space, I'll launch some of the Mentimeter activities for us to think about. These are going to be a couple of minutes in each space, so we're not going to dwell on these overly long. The first one is, what are your pain points coming into a new teaching session? So I'm going to invite you all in to this Mentimeter activity. You'll be prompted in a second to join that activity. And then I will share the activity itself. So you should have been prompted to join that with a question around what your regular challenges are in preparing for online delivery. If that hasn't happened, please indicate in the chat pod for me and I'll have another crack. Does that come up for you, Michelle?
It's just asked me, Lachlan, to I have to sign in. So I will do that because I haven't used Mentimeter before.
Oh, okay. Right. I think normally for participants, you should be able to join the activity without necessarily signing in, but
Lockie, it's asked me to add it and add the app.
All right. So first time using it. Yeah. Okay, folks. Sorry, my mistake. You can click on add it and it'll add the Mentimeter app quickly into your Zoom room and you'll be able to join in. Don't be too worried if we miss it for the first one, but I can see a couple of people have started contributing to the activity, trying to keep content engaging as a regular challenge, getting the subject outline ready. I can absolutely empathize with that. That seems to be on everybody's mind. I'm happy to try and reshare that activity if it's not working for people again. But yeah, it's probably prompted you to add Mentimeter if it hasn't already. Never enough time. I absolutely empathize. I can't see the responses. Okay, I'll try and share that as well. Screen sharing is paused. Oh, that's a good start. Let me reshare this. Okay, how's that? Can people see the Mentimeter responses now? Okay, fantastic. Yep, still a work in progress, I'm afraid, the Mentimeter integration. It's a bit fiddly. All right, so look, thank you. I can see some of the responses coming in there. Icebreaker activities, different ways to make online interactive, absolutely, engaging. Lack of time, yep, absolutely. That seems to be a recurring theme. Okay. All right, thanks very much, folks. I'm going to stop that activity for a second and launch the next one. The next question for us to think about, which is, in terms of the communication approaches that you're going to take with students, do you spend time thinking about how you're going to communicate with your student cohorts each session, or is it just something that you take for granted? That's my question. Now I'm going to launch the activity. Let's see what people have. So we'll try it again. Invite everybody to join the activity. That should prompt you above your chat, in your chat, to join the activity. And now I'm going to share the response window to see if that comes through. So the options that are in there, this is very small on my screen, mind you. include using the I2 announcement tool. If you're using your landing page to provide information to people, doing things in Zoom, discussion boards. Okay. Can everyone see that output window? Okay, great.
Small, Lachlan, you've got a big white space down the bottom. I'm not sure if you can.
I'm going to shift it across
I'm
to my
being
main
fussy,
screen.
sorry, but
No,
I
you be
I
fussy.
can't
That's
read the
okay.
text.
No, I hear what you're saying. Hang on one second. I'll move it across.
Well, that's better.
It's going to
Still
disappear.
small,
It's going to
but
disappear
better.
for 1 second and then get a lot bigger, hopefully. Just wait while I reshare. Now it's all disappearing. Hang on. It's put my video strip over the top of my Zoom controls. That's handy. All right, stop sharing. Let's get the activity results back. On that screen, share that stuff. No, it's still small. Okay. Anyway, it looks like the majority of people use the announcement tool in Zoom as well as their discussion boards as their main approaches for communication. Okay, let's dig slightly into that a little bit more. And what I'm specifically interested in at this point in time is your online meetings. When you hold your weekly Zoom meetings, do you think a lot in advance about what you're going to be doing in that space? Are you using it for one specific purpose, for example? Some people use it as a lecture space. It's replaced the lecture. Other people use it as a problem-solving space, that sort of thing. So this next question really digs into that.
And if you haven't mastered Mentimeter yet, like I have not mastered, feel free to whack it into the chat as well. So,
Absolutely.
you know, if there's things that are stopping you at this point in time.
Hopefully the invite has appeared for everybody to join this activity. Yep. Okay, great.
I don't have an invite, Lockie.
All right, I shall do it again. I have to say the integration is annoying me just a little. All right. The invitation should now be going back into the chat pod for everybody to join.
That's good. That's jumped up.
Okay.
There.
Okay, so as I said, this question was really about people's priorities within their online meetings, if they use it for specific reasons, or if it's just kind of a general catch-all. I have to run these, my students jump in there and then we wing it each week. And I can see from the responses coming in so far that problem solving and applying knowledge or skills learnt seems to feature pretty heavily as the main purpose for people using their online meetings. We'll wait and see if that adjusts a little bit.
Sorry, Lucky, I'm being asked to enter a code to vote.
A code?
Yeah.
That sounds very rude. Let me give you a link instead that you can open in your browser. Sorry, Lisa, if that's
all right.
not working for you.
Sorry, I'm feeling like an absolute Mentimeter novice.
No, don't be. I think it's just been...
Same for me.
Mine was working and now it's not. So
Yeah, it worked.
Okay.
Like it kind of got there slowly for the first question, and then since then it's been a bit all over the shop.
Okay.
I found an apps button at the bottom
Absolutely.
that then brought it back up.
Aha.
That helps.
Yeah, okay. So the apps button and the chat pod seem to superimpose themselves on top of one another, I think hiding Mentimeter for people, and that can be part of the problem. So if you hit the apps button down in the bottom of your Zoom navigation, that should bring up your invite. I can see more people are getting in there now. So that's probably the persistent problem. I do apologize for that.
Still asking me to vote.
Yeah.
For a vote code.
All right, we'll try it with the next one to see if that disappears. Obviously got a bit of work to do on that Mentimeter use, I guess, for me. All right, thank you for your feedback. This one's a particularly interesting one for me because I've worked with schools where they have pretty much a fairly rigid structure suggested for all new staff in what they do in their Zoom meetings. So for example, the idea that space is going to be used 50% for lecture delivery, new content delivery, 50% for students to work on assessment, as one example. Workshopping in and around assessment preparation. And that's it. They put that in front of their new staff and say, this is what we suggest you do with that time. As opposed to the other end of the spectrum, which is once your contract's been issued, what you do in your Zoom meetings is on you. So and all shades in between. So I am very interested about how each of you approach your online meetings. If any of you have a particular style or approach that you take, I'd love to hear from you. If you want to take your mic off mute and tell me about it. Or maybe it's something you haven't thought really about that much. I don't know.
Lachlan, in our school, what we do is all lectures are pre-recorded and situated within the modules as part of each topic in short bursts, up to sort of 10 minutes.
Yep.
For lectures, and the Zoom meeting forms the tutorial component, or where cases and problem solving is done. Also, there might be discussion around assessments and that kind of thing, but it really replaces that tutorial for the online cohort.
Okay, great. So that's a very specific purpose for it, and obviously that first option there would probably cater to that, I'm guessing, except with a bit of assessment thrown in as well in and around it. Is that the same for everybody else, or does anyone have a distinctly different approach?
I would say for ours, it's similar. We've got an online master's program. And so any new content is put up in the learning materials initially. And then the online meeting is a tutorial space, similar to what Annabelle had said, where we work through application of the learning content, give students an opportunity to ask any questions in that synchronous format, answer questions. So all of those things that you've kind of got on that list kind of all happen in a tutorial space.
All happen in 60 minutes, or maybe some weeks it's some weeks it's others.
Some 60, some 120.
There you go. Okay. Excellent. Thank you for your contributions there. The next question I've got to ask is in relation to your learning materials and your content. Annabelle was talking about hers a second ago with the lectures or mini lectures, concept lectures, lecture pod, whatever you'd like to refer to them as, featuring heavily in the materials. Obviously, if your subject or your course has gone through revitalization or a course build in recent times, these are the types of questions that you've probably been looking at. My question is, do you believe, looking at the content in your subject sites, that it is self-explanatory, that what is the learning materials that are provided to the students? Or do you feel that some form of scaffolding in and around the content provided to your students needs to be thought about? Or do you already provide it in some form? Or is it implied, really? Certainly that aspect of meaning making is something that all teachers do to some extent, greater or lesser. But is it something that you explicitly think about or have a strategy for? And so we have a question relating to that. Let's see how we go with Mentimeter this time. That's not the one. Okay, yep, this is the one. Now, for some reason, I'm going to try and share this. So you should all be receiving an invite either above your chat or in the apps area to an activity now. And I'm going to share the results for that in a second. This one is asking specifically about scaffolding of learning content, hot or not. And are there ways within that, those various continuums that you agree with? They're used to a greater extent, lesser extent. Just move your sliders to adjust, and I will now share those results as they come in. So some of the suggestions in there, do we provide a weekly summary of some sort or a breakdown about the materials to the students? Do we end up highlighting key content through our announcements or the things that we want students to be doing? Do we provide commentary, markups, annotations, etc. within the learning materials? Are clear expectations needed to be provided to students so that they understand what we think they should be doing? Or is it implied? Do we end up trying to augment what's there already with current examples? They might be industry specific, discipline specific, etc. And do we end up needing to try and provide learning strategies to students if they're not doing it themselves? Thank you for the results coming in. I can see we've had a greater level of success with that activity than previous ones. So I'll count that as a win. And it looks like no one's necessarily, I think, put in either 0 scores against any of these. So I'm guessing that to some extent we engage with some of these strategies, to all of us really, by and large. Are there any of these that are on there to start with that you feel are absolutely critical over all the others? Or any that you feel just have no place in there at all in the way that you approach? Again, I'm happy for people to come off mute and share your particular views on any of these ideas around scaffolding.
Lockie, can I say one of the key things that we found with our Master of Speech Pathology student is that yellow bar about providing clear expectations around student activity. One of the key things that we've done is allocated a time frame per activity and said, you know, this activity should take you 45 minutes, this activity should take you an hour, and really structured our learning materials each week so that there is the, you know, approximately, 5 or 6 hours of content for them to work through. And that's been crucial for us in terms of teaching our students how to manage their study. So we have overall, our students are very, very enthusiastic and would spend 6 hours on an activity that we only want them to spend half an hour on and then complain of burnout. So for us, putting caps on how much time they should be doing an activity in has been a really crucial aspect for us, and we've got some good feedback from the students around that, and it puts that onus of responsibility back on them to manage their study time and keep it within good time frames.
It's a really interesting idea as well, Lisa, I guess, from the point of view of we have that information at hand, or we should, within every subject, because we need it for our auditing, for our registration, our re-registration, for quantifying delivery times and course times. So that means it's available conceptually, but providing it to the students as well in terms of timings, sequences, etc. Yeah, I like it. Anyone else want to weigh in on scaffolding and learning content?
Lachlan, Marissa is competing with her 6-year-old, so she's not coming off mute.
Okay.
It's always the battle you lose, isn't it? But she's just said she's had feedback from students that they really like the direction in what to do next. So she uses a number of these tools listed to do that. Excellent.
Excellent. Now, I know, for example, as well, that in law and justice studies, in a number of the subjects, they provide a study guide to the students for each week, which is a 1-page document which explicitly identifies, I guess, the critical items. I like it, the students like it, but I'm always left with the question, why is it that their learning materials aren't, I guess, that intuitive, or why do we need to provide separate kind of documentation to interpret the other documentation? It's a bit of a paradox to my mind, I guess.
Yeah,
okay.
Can I comment on that, Lockie?
Please do.
Yeah, just on this slide, I think that's great, and we're increasingly giving students breakdowns of what to do. It'd be good to have a bit of in-servicing on how to readily attain the analytics from Interact to support that, because that worries me too, that we do break down things a lot and we do have some success with it, but it'd be good to be able to readily access some detailed analytics. And I'm not sure if everyone has had PD on how to do that, because that's very revealing. And the other thing that you just commented on about break things down further, it's just interesting that I think students, it's an indication of how time poor students are and really haven't got time to read and digest stuff. And I think they're responding to those really simple dot points. Do this, do that, rather than read a paragraph. So I wouldn't be leading to any criticism of what staff have written in the first place, needing to break it down. I think it's just more a reflection on the time available to students and the time they're willing to allocate. And again, not beating up students, I just think staff go to a lot of trouble to make sure things are very clear, but they still have to break it down to those dot points.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for that, John. I agree. I think that there is also a very significant debate out there around just how comprehensive learning materials need to be, should be. You know, there's a school of thought that basically says that learning modules are meant to simply be, I guess, a summary of sorts, or a highlighting of key themes or questions, etc., prompts, and not there to replace, for example, other bodies of knowledge that are provided to the students, for example, like textbooks and things. And then what we put in learning modules sometimes seems to compete directly with more formal, I guess, learning material types elsewhere. So, you know, I'm not going to sort of get into that today, but that, you know, when you see a scope in terms of how much material is provided to students, it does make you think about that difference. You know, we get very, very long, comprehensive, multimodal collections of content within learning modules, and we get subjects that literally will have very, very brief sort of highlights provided. But anyway, that's a discussion for another day.
Lachlan, that follows on, probably aligns with Marissa's point. She's just said people use lots of different layouts, etc., in I2 as well, which I think is a really good point, because sometimes, you know, students spend a lot of energy and time looking for something that in another subject is somewhere else. So it's a good opportunity to just, you know, mention that consistency amongst courses and subjects and so on, and how it can remove a little bit of that cognitive load for students. And instead of spending it on looking for something, they can be actually spending it on the work. So again, not today's debate, but another interesting point. So
Absolutely.
Hp5 timelines are really useful for that too. Like, I get a lot of comments from students about that. You know, the weekly to-do list.
Yeah, and look, I will point out, I don't want to get kind of, I guess, too far down this rabbit hole, but when we move to another learning management system, which, you know, is a process that's going to take us the next 18 months to 2 years, regardless of which system we go to, my understanding at this stage, the options out there, all of them have those kind of checklist type facilities at the module level, which allow you to identify the parts of the learning materials in a list that can be checked off by students as they do them, which basically will serve that similar sort of purpose, you know, providing an itemized view of the way that the materials have been organized, so that we do get that top-down view. All right, the next thing I want to get into is actually the tool itself that we're suggesting might help with planning for delivery. So at the moment, we've been talking about a bit of a wish list, and this is based on some earlier feedback as well. And essentially that is that we would like there to be a mechanism to support new teachers, first-time teachers, but also pre-existing teachers that want to use it as a reflective tool that provides a way to prompt thinking around the best ways to approach teaching, identify problem areas before they happen, or maybe to identify them after they've happened, before they happen again. We don't want it to be an arduous process. We want something that allows for structured planning of teaching. And the idea at the end of it is to produce some form of artifact or document that would help other processes. So in that case, you know, we're just talking about things like your EDRS or your outline preparation for subjects, potentially helping to identify what sort of jobs you need to log in a service request, areas that need attention. Maybe it's influencing your scholarly activity considerations, etc. All of those things, it would be nice to have something that facilitates all of those. And hence we have come up with a tool, which essentially is a Google form at this stage, called the Online Teaching Plan. And I'm going to provide the link to that in the chat for you, but I'm going to be sharing it on my screen in a second and walking through it. So you're absolutely free to ignore what I'm telling you and look through it yourself, but I'll just provide that link if I can move this out of the way. This is in the slides, obviously, that I've shared for today and we'll share again. But let me open this up. The online teaching plan is embedded within the Professional Learning Hub as well. So if you lose links, etc., after today, you can go back to the Professional Learning Hub and find it under the Planning tab. And you can absolutely send it to whoever you like. I'm going to show you the version in its own browser window rather than all of this wasted real estate. But it's available to you in the online, in the Professional Learning Hub. Let me bring up the form now. There it is. Okay. All right, we'll go right to the top. I'll bring up my Zoom window so I can see the chat over there. Okay, so what this form does, I'm looking at the back end so we can just zip through the questions, is it asks you to think about your teaching in terms of your communication strategy, your content strategy, and your strategy for assessment. It's not there to compete or replace other pre-existing processes that we go through for building content, etc. It's not there to replace other things like course building, subject building processes, revitalization, all that kind of stuff. This is there to help you think on how you're going to approach delivery specifically. Our suggestion is that the process takes around 15 minutes. And when you submit this form, you will get all of it back in a document for you to use at your discretion afterwards. Hence, it collects your email, put in your name, your faculty, the school that you're in, subject code that you're delivering. It'll condense all of this information into your response, your document that you get back, the session that you're going to be teaching into, thinking about the cohorts that you're teaching to. Obviously that features, is it face-to-face? Is it distance? Is it both? Your initial questions, it's asking about previous experience, if you've taught this before. If you haven't, it'll take you to the next lot of questions. If you have, then it opens up a reflection session that basically says, the last time I taught this, let's think about some of the key takeaways that you might have had at that point in time. This might apply to some of the assessments that you ran. It might be about some of the ways that your content did and didn't work. Maybe it's about some of your student evaluation feedback about things that were less than effective, etc., or worked really well. Both ways, but potentially up to 3 of those takeaways can be captured here in this document. Then we get into our strategies. The communication strategy questions. The first one asks you to think about how do you provide information to your students. Remember we had our question before in Menti about communication strategies. This is in a similar vein. How are you going to be doing that? Well, I'm going to provide it in the outline. In terms, this is contact information. I use the academic contacts area, for example. I provide it on the landing page. I provide it via announcements or other, for example. How do you provide new information to your students? You use the announcement tool, a dynamic homepage, your Zoom meetings, emails. Is it embedded in another tool? We had H5P mentioned not long ago in terms of timelines. Use the discussion board. Obviously, you can select multiple answers for this. Next question, how do you intend to orient your students to the subject site? There's a range of options in here, including pre-recorded videos. Do you provide a welcome on the landing page? Enough information is already there in the subject outline, for example. right down to, I will not be providing an orientation to the subject, for example. You can check all those things. Or I do it in person, face to face. I walk the students through it. You know, these are all considerations. Then we move on to specifically about the announcement tool in I2. How often do you send announcements? And again, we've seen all shades of grey in this area, whether or not people send 4 and 5 a week, whether people are sending 1 every fortnight, and everything in between. But it's worth thinking about upfront, particularly for new staff, so that they have a strategy. Quite often yep, go ahead.
Lachlan, that is right. And one of the first things I show my students, particularly first years, which they really appreciate, is they can get into their profile thing on their page and actually turn off notifications. So it means they won't get sent the email notification, but then I just prompt them to read the announcements. So that's something they really appreciate, because if they're in four subjects and getting 4 or 5 emails notices a week, it's easy to tune out.
Absolutely. And I think my understanding is the notification settings really should apply only to within Blackboard. So if when you're sending your announcements and you click on the send email immediately, that bypasses the notifications setting for Blackboard. So they should still get the emails, but that's a discussion for a separate day. Annabelle,
Sure.
I could see you got your hand up.
Yeah, so one of the things that we had as part of our accreditation is a subject audits, and with that audit, the number of announcements was also looked at, and in some subjects there were massive numbers, and the SESs tended to there tend to be a relationship in that students felt overwhelmed, and if there were lots and lots of announcements. So I think the idea of a digest or something like that, something that comes out once a week with, significant events, is probably important, because students just felt like they were drowning, was some of the feedback, I suppose. So yeah, I think that's good to think about.
Absolutely. And look, some of the other feedback I've had from staff that take that approach, for example, as a baseline, this is not an absolute. If you're saying, for example, that you're going to send a weekly digest email, it also helps with structuring your teaching. This isn't just about the student experience. It's also about how the teachers feel about their approach week to week. If there is structure there, that can be a helpful thing in and of itself. And if that means Sunday afternoon or Monday morning, I'm sending out my digest for the week, for example, that includes some of those expectations that we talked about, putting to the students and identifying some of those key areas, etc. Maybe you're using a template, and that's where our next question starts to delve into underneath. In terms of structure with your announcements, are you using a faculty template for your announcements to help organize the content? And the answer's there, yes, and I know how to do it, so stop asking me. Yes, but I need to learn how to do it, at which point it prompts that kind of question around, I need to log a job, I need help with learning how to use this thing, or no, I'm pretty comfortable with the way I do things already. Again, this tool is for you. It's not for us. We get some of the data from the responses to help us kind of identify, for example, how many academics are identifying, oh, they want to learn how to do it. And then that would then prompt us running more PD on it, for example. See, we've got one in the chat there already. And absolutely, Lisa, send me an email outside of this and I will show you all about it. Let's move along. I'm aware of time getting away from us, as it always does. Next set of questions around Zoom. And this time it's that same question that we had earlier. In terms of your focus for holding your online meetings, what's it going to be? And then essentially, if you had to identify a secondary focus area, there are a number of responses there to help you think about that overt structure if you're going to use one. Then we get down to audience engagement. For example, in our online meetings, for example, it might be face-to-face as well. It applies equally. This one's talking about online meetings, though. It's saying, how do you intend to engage students? Are you going to use them? Is it likely, for example, you're going to be polling them? Are you going to try and use icebreaker activities? Will you be using breakout rooms, for example? Do you want it to be more student-led interaction? I won't be using any engagement strategies is one option that's in there. obviously it's designed just to get you thinking about whether or not you use them or not. And then if you need help in these particular areas, to be able to reach out and talk to your peers or talk to DLT, for example, about some of those strategies. Moving right along, looking at the actual tools used for audience engagement, which ones might you be likely to use? And there are a range of options in there: Mentimeter, Zoom polls, Padlet, the reactions tool inside Zoom, just using the chat pod in Zoom, for example. Again, I won't be using audience engagement tools. You can select all of these because this is really about your plan. By ticking some of these, it might be prompting you, I want to learn more about a particular tool or not. Then we get into the subject content, your strategy for the content within your subject. How is the core learning material provided to the students? Now, I'm aware, obviously, that with the content in your subject sites, it's a much longer prospect to be changing that in a lot of cases. But it may very well be that some of these options are things that you can add in yourself on the fly, or maybe you're thinking about the next time you deliver it. Maybe it's the changes that you can make in situ, for example. So the options in there asks you to talk about, are you providing text-based resources, images and diagrams, embedded video? Annabelle mentioned some of those before. Are you using podcasts, for example, or other embedded audio? Subject textbooks, subject readings, like using the Leganto tool, for example, in your subject sites. Again, you're just identifying how it's put together. Are there supplementary resources outside of the key learning materials that you are providing as well in a separate folder? What do they look like? Where are they provided? Then the last couple of questions start to get into scaffolding your delivery and scaffolding the learning content and the materials. We went into that question a little bit before in to some extent, but this is really just asking you to identify the strategies that you're going to be taking, right down to no additional scaffolding is required. In terms of how you approach your lectures, how are lectures incorporated into your subject? This is a topical question, obviously, because there's a real question around, is the lecture dead? Are we using micro lectures? Are we pre-recording? Are we still using the live space? And again, this is not a debate in that sense. This is really just asking you to think about how you're going to be approaching lecture-like delivery. Is it a part of your subject or not? Then we get down to your assessment strategy. And this is a very light on view of your assessment. It's not to replace your other kind of processes that you take in reviewing the assessment that's in there, but really it's about the scaffolding of your assessment in the delivery during the session. How are you going to approach scaffolding around your assessment? And some of the options in there include things like hosting drop-in sessions before the assessment. Do you host targeted online meetings, for example, that the students know about before the assessment is due? You provide pre-recorded materials, for example, around the assessments. Do you identify the specific places where students should be asking about assessment, or is it a free-for-all? Do you locate all of your assessment-related material all within a specific area? So there's a number of options in there for you to consider. And then we get down to, have you considered, or is your assessment connected? One item to the other, and do they inform, like the feedback from one informing subsequent tasks? And then lastly, we get down to grading and feedback in terms of how students understand the marking processes that you go through and the importance of the rubrics, etc. Is it self-explanatory, or do you actually take the time to unpack how that process works so that they engage with it? And similarly, we get into assessment feedback and how the grade center functions. This last question around the grade center is about you and your confidence in using the grade center as it stands, or whether you feel you might need to reach out and get some assistance or attend PD in and around the grade center use. So look, all of this is captured in the form when you fill it out, and it's emailed back to you so that you have essentially your recipe for how you intend to approach delivery, or maybe how you dealt with this previously. It can be used both ways. Time has really gotten away from me on this one, so I'm going to leave the link with you on the online teaching plan, and I'm going to hand over to Michelle for her lightning tour of the subject delivery guide. Michelle, I apologise in advance for how much I've hogged the time.
No,
here.
Lachlan, I mean, it's just all really interesting, and I think everyone's really appreciated the conversation. So you're probably all full of information, so I will go reasonably quickly, because then you can always engage with this at another time as well. Where Lachlan has today been focusing very much on that bigger picture thinking about your subject and your teaching, I'm going to focus much more in on the to-do tasks of if I have to get my subject outline published and I have to get my grade centre sorted. So the two things I'm going to talk about today are the I2 Help and Support site and the subject delivery guide. I like to sneak one in. Why I'm just showing you this Interact 2 list of subjects at this point in time is the best way to get to the subject delivery guide or the I2 Help and Support site is by this little button up here, the Help. If you just click on that button, it will take you into the Interact 2 Help Guide. Now, the Interact 2 Help Guide is, as it suggests, a guide to help you with Interact 2, mainly focusing on Blackboard and supporting you with the LMS. Here, there's some quick links, subject delivery guide, sort of key things you'll need at certain times. So at the moment, CSU replay, online meeting, and export import of your content is really important. For the end of session, but also the start of session, there is a session on Thursday about Grade Centre support and getting your Grade Centre set up for the start of session, Grade Centre support. If you are looking for something in here though that is specific, one of the best ways to do it is click on the A to Z here or from here, and from there you'll get an alphabetical list. So for example, if I wanted to look at tests, I can click on tests, and here it will take me through a series of information about how to set up tests. The pages aren't perfect. I'd love to say they were. You'll go there, you'll find some information missing, or it might refer you on to Blackboard. If you do though, there is a feedback button, and we're very happy to add information in that would be helpful. So that is the I2 Help site. Another nice place to have a look at from the site is the help and contacts. There's the support for students, academic support with the SRS, so accessing DLT's support services. There's Blackboard help as well, and then the link to DIT. The other really probably important aspect of the I2 Help support site is this Grade Centre support. And if you click on that, you'll see the first link up here on the right is your Grade Centre champions. So if people are having trouble with Grade Centre, the first point of call is this fantastic list of names to support people knowing where to go and to have a look to find out information. Now, the actual topic I'm supposed to be talking about is the subject delivery guide. So if I just click on this link, the subject delivery guide is a list of tasks that may or may not be relevant in your subject development. It's not a checklist by any means, it's just a guide. There's dates associated when we go in and have a look, but again, they're a guide. Your school might say, oh, look, no, we don't need it for another week, but because it encompasses all faculties, there's a date there, and then you can adjust as needed. It's really important to note that obviously the dates are a guide, and faculty and school dates are the ones that are the most important. The other thing that you can do that is here is a link to Lachlan's very wonderful PD session. So it's just another access for that. Obviously, he's got takes you off to the Professional Learning Hub, because in here you might go, oh, you're talking about a particular, like for example, the announcements. where do I find that template? And so you can go and have a look for Lachlan's PD as well. So if we go into the guide, the first thing probably to note is that it has pre-session, early weeks of session, and during and end of week sessions. You can download it to go into your calendar. If you look at the instructions, you can actually get it so that it embeds into your actual calendar. So you don't have to have separate calendars. Depends what people prefer. It is a bit of a problem with Macs, unfortunately, but for everyone else, it works really well. So here, for example, if we go to our early weeks of session, we've just gone through the heading, or actually we'll go to pre-session. If we scroll down, you can see that it gives you some advice. So this week here on the 14th of Feb, it's saying, look, send your students a welcome message, you know, talk to them about your best contact methods and so on, which aligns with the information that Lachlan had. So you've sort of decided how you're going to get things to run, and then this is just giving you a little prompt to communicate that to students. Setting up your assessment tools. It's best not to set up any assessment tools until your subject outline has been published, and then you can align with your subject outline, and the little reminder about Grade Centre. There is information about timetabling, and if you go back, if we track to the week before, you'll see here how there is information about getting ready. So having a look at your subject, viewing it in student preview, making sure how your subject is actually what the students are seeing, checking your links, making sure your links work and are still up to date. And so there's a few step-by-step guides through there. Of course, there's also a link in here to the SRS. There is also a subject health checklist, which is designed to step you through all the things that you need just to make sure and check off to make sure your site is ready for your students. So making sure your Zoom set up, making sure your homepage is up to date, and that your content is available. It then proceeds, sorry, I'm going to doing a bit of scrolling to the early weeks of session, giving you some tips. You'll see here, as we were discussing, Lachlan's announcement template videos are included. So for those people who want to have a look at those, some ideas on icebreakers and so on. And it continues through to the end of session where it talks about maintaining your teacher presence, what you should do before each assessment and so on. All of it is a guide. As I said, it's not necessarily about having to do all these things. It's more of a prompt for you, as Lachlan's teaching plan is to see, okay, where are we up to in the session? Are you doing these things? Are there some different things that you could try? We will be changing the guide slightly next session, so it'll make it a little bit simpler, that it'll have a list of tasks, and then if you want to find out more information, you click into the guide and can find it out. So I'll be interested to know, certainly, if people do give it a try and how they find it. You may find it easier, you may not. All sort of feedback is welcome. And as always with the I2 Help and Support site, there is a feedback button over here, and we really welcome your feedback, because if you're not finding it useful, there's no point in having it, because it is designed for you to make your lives easier, to get some of these sort of tasks out of the way, so that then you can focus on your teaching and making sure that that student experience is the one that you want to deliver, and that you're not spending hours trying to embed videos and different things. So knowing that we have only just had a moment, I will pause there, ask if there's any questions.
Take a breath, Michelle. Take a breath.
I know. I did that very quickly. So, Lachlan, I will hand back to you. If Ruth is still here, is Ruth still? Yes, there you are, Ruth. Sorry, I couldn't spot you. Ruth's just got a quick question I might get your help with at the end, Lachlan.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Okay, look, thanks everybody. We're almost at time. The last thing that we basically would like to talk to you about in this session is just to mention the what's going on at the moment in terms of building a second tool for lesson/tutorial planning of the same nature, really, to prompt thinking about how that's going to be organized and structured. And I'm sure that a number of you are probably familiar with lesson plans, if you've worked in teaching before, for example, and how granular they can get at the level of, in terms of sequencing of activities and timings and how much time is going to be spent and what each agent in the interaction is doing. Students are doing this, teachers doing this, all that kind of stuff. And so we're having look at a number of different lesson plan type templates, really with a mind of coming up with one that actually is going to work for either online or face-to-face delivery, that is flexible enough to be able to capture the type of sequencing that people want to think about, how activities are being run, their timings, the resources required for each, their connection to future, previous learnings, etc., so that they're not just isolated experiences. We do like to try and connect things explicitly to assessment and learning outcomes here. You've probably heard the term constructive alignment 100 times or more. If you've been around here for a little while, it is thrown around at CSU quite a lot. We like to look specifically at agency in terms of what people are doing and in terms of what their roles are in those encounters. And obviously, really, we want the tool to be something that identifies problem areas, again, with resources that are going to be needed if we don't have them already, training that's going to be needed if there isn't any, etc. But overarching all of that really is the need for it to be something that is a pragmatic tool for the teacher. So it's not a data gathering exercise for elsewhere. It's really about a tool that will help you put in place some structure, maybe for single critical lessons, or maybe just generally how you want to approach, for example, your online meetings, your tutorials, etc. And that will, again, we talked before about informing that scholarly academic sort of reflective process. This sort of document alongside the online teaching plan could inform, those processes. So I'm not going to run the activity. We are at time, and I know we've got questions and other things. I'm happy to hang around here for a little while anyway and talk to people about any of the stuff for today. Look, I'll share the slides again in a second, but thank you all for coming out for the first of the PD series for 2022-30. I wish you all a really productive teaching session, and if you want to get in touch with myself, Michelle, etc., please feel free to do so. Otherwise, have a great teaching week, and I'm going to stop the recording in a second.
You have got everyone so well trained, Lachlan.